She had no idea who she was talking to. The words echoed in my mind as I stood at the edge of our porch, watching my wife cradle our newborn in trembling arms. Her cheeks were stained with tears, her back pressed to the front door like she was shielding it with her life. And 3 feet in front of her, lips curled, sunglasses pushed high on her nose, stood Karen. She wasn't screaming. No, she was calm. Too calm. That made it worse. "I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing, Madison," she said. "This isn't about you. It's about the baby. She needs to be somewhere safe. With someone stable." My wife shook her head violently. "You're insane. Get off our property." Karen smirked. "See that right there? That tone? That's what Child Protective Services is going to notice. I already filed a report. They're coming today." I stepped forward quietly. Karen didn't notice me at first. She was too focused on breaking my wife's spirit. "You really think I won't fight for my family?" Madison snapped, her voice cracking. "Oh, honey," Karen sneered. "I've been on the HOA board for 11 years. I know how this works. I know how to make things happen. One anonymous call. One neighbor complaint. That's all it takes. And judging by the baby's cries at night, I'd say there's a case for." That's when I spoke. "You've said enough." Karen froze. She turned her head slowly, like she didn't believe the voice belonged to me. When her eyes met mine, I saw her falter for the first time. Just a flicker. But it was there. Fear. She tried to recover. I didn't see you there. I was just trying to help. You've been trying to control, intimidate, and harass," I said, walking toward her. "You think this neighborhood is your kingdom. But you crossed the line the moment you stepped between my wife and our child." Karen opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to threaten. I didn't care. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You picked the wrong family." I stopped just a foot from her, calm and steady. She looked into my face, searching for weakness. She found none. That's when it hit her. The realization she had no idea who she was dealing with. I served 2 decades in the Navy. I've disarmed bombs in villages with no names, stared death in the face more times than I can count. But nothing has ever brought out my instincts like someone threatening my child. This woman thought she was fighting a helpless couple. She didn't know I was trained to neutralize threats before they even understand what they've become. She had no idea I was a Navy SEAL, and now she was about to find out. They say that when warriors retire, they dream of silence. I didn't know what that meant until I left the Navy. For 20 years, my life was defined by noise, the roar of helicopters, the snap of gunfire, the metallic click of gear locking into place. Out there, I was sharp, focused, dangerous, but inside, something was always waiting to break. I didn't realize how heavy that weight was until I laid it down. When I left the SEALs, I didn't know who I was without the mission. I'd seen brothers fall, promises broken, governments lie. I'd watched sunrises from rooftops in war zones and held children dying in places the world forgot. Peace wasn't just foreign, it felt unreachable. Until Madison. I met her at a veterans charity fundraiser of all places. She was volunteering. She didn't know anything about war, but she knew how to listen, really listen, and for someone like me, that was a miracle. Her eyes didn't flinch at my stories, and her smile made me forget why I'd been afraid to tell them. 3 years later, she became my wife. She was soft where I was hardened, kind where I was skeptical. Where I saw threats, she saw people. And somehow, against everything I'd lived through, she made me want to build something that wasn't for a mission or a flag, but for us. We moved to a quiet suburban community just outside Asheville, North Carolina. Safe, quiet, trees lined the streets. Neighbors waved. There were block parties and lemonade stands, and the HOA sent newsletters that talked more about flower beds than anything else. It felt unreal. When Madison found out she was pregnant, I panicked. I won't lie. The idea of bringing a child into the world felt terrifying. I had no blueprint for fatherhood. My father left when I was a boy, and the military became my father, my teacher, my judge. But Madison? She glowed. She read every book, painted a sky full of stars on the nursery ceiling, and played classical music to her belly like our daughter could already hear her. And maybe she could. When Ella was born, something shifted in me. She came out kicking, pink and loud, lungs strong, hands clenched. The nurse handed her to me, and I remember thinking, this is the only mission that matters now. Ella was perfect, a little version of her mother, with my stubborn jaw and her warm eyes. She cried too much, ate too little, and took over every square inch of our lives. I didn't mind, not for a second. I'd fought to survive. Now, I wanted to live. We were happy, really happy. Every morning, I'd take Ella out in her stroller. Madison would wave from the porch, still in her robe, coffee in hand. The neighbors would smile. Some of them were retired, some young couples like us. Our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Sanders, used to bring over cookies for the baby, though I suspected she just liked chatting with Madison. That's when I met Karen for the first time. She stopped us during one of our morning walks, wore a windbreaker with the HOA logo, oversized sunglasses, and a clipboard, always a clipboard. She smiled too wide and crouched near the stroller. "Oh, she's adorable," she cooed. "Is she sleeping through the night yet?" "Almost," I said. Karen tilted her head. A few of the residents were worried, heard a lot of crying the other night. Some of us are light sleepers. Just something to keep in mind, honey. She said it sweetly, smiled the whole time. But there was something in her eyes, something tight and calculated. I brushed it off. Madison didn't. "That woman gives me the creeps," she whispered later. "I've seen worse." I told her. "She's just a bored neighbor with too much time." I was wrong. Bored people with too much time and too much control are dangerous. At the time, I didn't know Karen was just getting started. I didn't know that clipboard of hers wasn't just for rules, it was for collecting ammunition. I didn't know she'd set her sights on us. All I knew was that I finally had something worth protecting, and I was about to be tested in ways I never expected. It started with a mailbox, a chipped corner, barely visible unless you were looking for it, and Karen was always looking. We had just come home from the pediatrician. Ella had been fussy all morning, and Madison was exhausted. I was pulling the diaper bag from the trunk when I heard the telltale clack of heels on pavement. Precise, confident, performed. "Excuse me." A chirpy voice called out, sugar-dipped and stinging like lemon juice in a cut. "Mr. Beck," I said, turning. "Ethan Beck." She extended a manicured hand like she expected me to bow. "Karen Langley, head of the HOA Compliance Committee. Welcome to the neighborhood." She smiled, tight, rehearsed, teeth that didn't quite meet her eyes. "Thanks," I said, shaking her hand with the kind of politeness I'd learned in tense negotiations overseas. Karen's gaze drifted past me to our front porch, where Madison stood, rocking Ella gently. The baby was fussing again. Karen's nose twitched. "Oh, what a beautiful child," she said, voice tilting higher. "How old is she?" 5 weeks, Madison called softly. She tried to smile, but her shoulders tensed. Karen nodded, too quickly. Newborns. Precious but fragile. When my boys were babies, I always followed the HOA's noise ordinances to the letter. Nap time was sacred, and I made sure not to disturb anyone on the block. Such an important age for neurological development. She didn't say we were being too loud. She didn't have to. "Good to know," I replied, masking my irritation. "Oh," she perked up, flipping a page on her clipboard. "Before I forget, I noticed your mailbox has some peeling paint. It's a minor violation, nothing urgent, just a reminder. We like to keep the community uniform. Makes everyone feel secure." Secure. I gave her a small nod. "I'll take care of it." Karen's eyes lingered on me, like she was measuring something. "You're military, aren't you?" I stiffened. "Was retired." She smiled wider. "That explains it. The posture. The control. We love having men of service in the neighborhood. So disciplined. So reliable." She said it like I was a breed of dog. Then she turned her gaze to Madison again. "If you ever need help," she added, "I'm just across the street." I've raised 3 children, ran 3 PDAs, and now I manage almost everything in this community. I know how overwhelming it can be for first-time mothers. I saw Madison's jaw tighten. She said nothing. Ella let out a small cry, and Karen's eyes flicked toward the baby with that same clinical concern, as if she were assessing a broken appliance. Well, Karen chirped, flipping her clipboard closed. Enjoy your day. And please don't forget about that mailbox. She turned and strode off like she'd just completed an inspection. That was our first real encounter, a thinly veiled warning wrapped in neighborly charm. I remember the moment Karen disappeared into her perfectly trimmed yard, white hydrangeas lined up like soldiers. Madison looked at me and whispered, "There's something wrong with her. She's just controlling," I said, loading the diaper bag into the house. But I wasn't being honest, not even with myself, because deep down, I'd seen that look before. In war zones, in conflict zones, in places where power was a game played quietly, surgically, and always with plausible deniability. Karen wasn't chaotic. She was strategic. She didn't shout. She whispered in ways that made others act. People like that don't need authority to take control. They just need permission. And we had just moved into her territory. It didn't take long for the notices to start. The first one was about the mailbox, again. This time, it was official, a printed envelope on HOA letterhead folded neatly into our doorframe. Violation hashtag 104B. Paint inconsistency/community uniformity breach. A $25 fine and a 30-day correction period. I didn't say anything at first. I figured it was routine. A nuisance, not a threat. Then came the grass. Your lawn length exceeds regulation. The letter read, quoting the community guidelines in bold. We just had rain the night before. The blades weren't even 2 inches over the standard. I shrugged it off, pulled the mower out, and handled it that afternoon. But when I went to put the mower back in the garage, I saw her, Karen, across the street, arms folded, sipping from a mug that said neighborhoods thrive on order. Her sunglasses were on, but I didn't need to see her eyes. I could feel them, watching, waiting. It became a pattern. Every time we breathed, Karen seemed to sniff the air. One morning, I opened the front door to find a gentle reminder notice about the garbage bins. Apparently, they had been left out too long after collection. Another time, we got cited for having a non-approved patio umbrella color. A beige umbrella Madison had bought on sale. Too close to tan, the letter claimed, creates visual disharmony. Madison started joking at first. She called Karen the suburban warden, trying to make light of it. But I could see the strain growing in her. The baby kept her up most nights, and now, this creeping invisible pressure was invading her home. We moved through our day, like suspects instead of residents, second-guessing every decision. Then Karen crossed the line. It was a Thursday morning, quiet except for birdsong and the distant hum of a leaf blower. Madison was on the porch, rocking Ella gently. I was inside just finishing some dishes when I heard a voice, too close, too intrusive. "You look exhausted, Madison." I stepped outside fast. Karen stood at the foot of our steps, dressed in athletic gear, like she was out for a run, though I noticed she wasn't sweating. Her eyes were fixed on my wife, who was swaying back and forth with tired rhythm. "I'm fine," Madison said, her voice tense. "You sure? I mean, no offense, but you look overwhelmed. It's normal, especially with new mothers. Hormones, sleep deprivation. Sometimes women don't even realize they're spiraling." I froze. She said it so sweetly, so quietly, but every word was laced with a scalpel's precision. "Is there something you need, Karen?" I asked, stepping beside Madison. Karen looked up, blinking like she hadn't noticed me. "Oh, no, just checking in. You know how it is. Community care and all that. We keep an eye on each other." I didn't answer. Karen let the silence stretch. Then, with a final glance at Madison, that same smug scan, she smiled. "Anyway, if you ever need help, or just someone to talk to, I'm always available. Always." Then she left. Madison didn't say a word. She just stood there, holding Ella tighter. That night, my wife cried. Not sobbing, just soft, helpless tears as she fed the baby and stared at the wall. She's trying to make me feel like I'm not enough, she whispered. Like I'm failing already. You're not, I said firmly. She wants control, that's all. And people like her only win if we play her game. But inside, I was unsettled. Because Karen wasn't just playing by the HOA rulebook anymore. She was probing, testing boundaries, emotional ones. And I knew this pattern all too well. This wasn't about lawns or mailboxes or umbrellas. It was about dominance. She was softening us up. And I had a sinking feeling she was just getting started. It was a Tuesday when the knock came. Not a gentle one. Not the kind that says, neighbor. It was the kind that says badge, sharp, heavy, and final. I opened the door and found two strangers standing on my porch. A woman in a dark gray suit, clipboard in hand, and a younger man beside her with a small tablet and a thin, polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Beck, the woman asked. I nodded slowly, already feeling that cold, instinct crawl up my spine. We're from Child Protective Services. We've received a report concerning the welfare of your infant daughter, Ella. My throat went dry. Behind me, I heard Madison's footsteps. She came into view, holding Ella against her chest, eyes wide with confusion. What is this? The CPS agent glanced briefly at Madison, then back at me. We're here to perform a welfare check. We received information that the child may be exposed to an unsafe domestic environment. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at her. What kind of information? Madison asked, panic rising in her voice. What does that even mean? The agent cleared her throat and adjusted her clipboard. Multiple complaints, actually, reports of excessive infant crying, suspected postpartum neglect, possible emotional instability on the mother's part. Madison gasped softly. That's a lie. I stepped in. We have nothing to hide. But you'll be transparent with us right now. Who made these reports? I'm afraid we can't disclose that, the mail agent said quickly. All reports are anonymous. Of course they are. Karen. That name wasn't just a guess anymore, it was a certainty. The timing, the phrasing, the cruelty of it. She hadn't just pushed us. She declared war. They entered. They inspected. Took notes. Asked questions with clinical detachment. How often does the baby cry? Is she breastfed or formula fed? Do either of you have a history of mental health diagnoses? Madison did her best to answer, but her hands were shaking. Her voice cracked on every third word, and every time Ella stirred in her arms, she flinched like they were tallying it against her. I could feel her breaking, and I hated that I couldn't stop it. After half an hour, they left, unsatisfied, but with nothing to pin on us. We may follow up with additional visits, the woman said, tucking her clipboard away. Thank you for your cooperation. I didn't reply. I just closed the door behind them and locked it. Madison sank onto the couch, holding Ella so tightly, it was like she was afraid someone would rip her away. She didn't cry this time, not at first. She just sat there, staring at the blank TV screen. Then she whispered, What if they believe her next time? She has no proof, I said. That didn't stop them from coming. And she was right. I'd handled cartel soldiers, insurgents, corrupt officials with bombs strapped to their bodies. But nothing terrified me like what I saw in Madison's eyes that night. Helplessness, doubt, the weight of motherhood twisted by fear. I stayed up late, going over everything in my head. Karen hadn't made a mistake. She'd made move. Calculated, precise. She was escalating with intent. And that's when I realized she wasn't just trying to bully us. She wanted our daughter. The next morning, I walked out to retrieve the mail and found Karen standing at the edge of her driveway, watering her rose bushes like nothing had happened. She smiled when she saw me, that same smug, unearned confidence she wore like perfume. Rough day yesterday, she asked sweetly. I didn't answer. She continued, eyes still on her roses, being a parent is hard. Some people just aren't equipped for it. Especially when they're already unstable. I clenched my jaw. You should be careful, Ethan, she said, her tone still pleasant. There are people who really care about children's safety. And when you love a child, really love them, you do whatever it takes to keep them safe. She turned then, finally looking at me, and her eyes were ice. "You'll hand her to me eventually," she said softly. "One way or another." For a second, I just stood there, stunned by the audacity of it. The naked threat. Then I realized something else. She wanted me to explode. She wanted me to lash out, to yell, to shove her, to give her the ammo she needed. I didn't. I smiled and said, "Not in this lifetime." Then I walked back into my house, locked the door, and started making a plan. Because this wasn't just a neighborhood spat anymore. This was war. I wasn't always the quiet guy with a baby monitor in one hand and a paintbrush in the other. There was a time not that long ago when I carried something else, a suppressed rifle, an encrypted radio, and the weight of lives that depended on me never missing. I enlisted at 19. A dumb kid from Georgia with more anger than direction. The kind of guy recruiters circle like hawks. I didn't come from much, no family legacy, no college track, no fallback plan. But I was good at keeping calm when things got loud. Too calm, maybe. By 23, I was running ops in Afghanistan as part of SEAL Team 3. My job was recon and silent entry, in and out before they even knew I was there. Villages, safe houses, weapons caches, and sometimes people. The kind of missions that never make headlines because they're not supposed to. I've moved through the homes of warlords at midnight. I've studied the faces of enemies who didn't know they were marked until it was too late. I've memorized floor plans in 5 minutes and improvised when walls didn't match. The world thinks Navy SEALs are just muscle and firepower. They're wrong. We are patience, precision, discipline. We don't kick in doors first. We calculate who's behind them, what they want, how they breathe. And when we strike, it's not rage. It's clarity. I never enjoyed violence. I just learned how to wield it like a scalpel. But somewhere along the way, it caught up to me. Not on the battlefield, in the silences between missions, the dreams, the ghosts, the moments where I caught myself flinching at fireworks or gripping the steering wheel a little too tight at a four-way stop. My turning point came on a rooftop in Iraq. We were covering a diplomat extraction, routine, until it wasn't. Gunfire from an alley. My teammate took a round through the neck. I held him while he bled out, whispering the name of his newborn daughter over and over so he could die hearing it. That was the night I knew I was done. The medals didn't matter. The adrenaline no longer thrilled me. I had nothing left to prove and everything left to lose. I left the SEALs after 2 more rotations. Quietly. No big ceremony. No speech. Just a plain ride back home and a new kind of silence waiting for me. Then I met Madison. She didn't know the specifics, and I never volunteered them. She just knew I was ex-military. She assumed I'd been through things and respected the space around them. That's what made her different. She didn't try to fix me, just gave me room to breathe. We built our life from the ground up, every picture frame, every new lamp, every scratch on the floor from the crib we assembled at 2 a.m. I traded my rifle for a toolbox, my helmet for a baby carrier. And slowly, I felt myself becoming something else. A husband, a father, a man who could feel again without fear. But people like Karen, they don't see that man. They see softness, smiles, a stroller and a slow wave. They think I've forgotten who I used to be. They mistake peace for weakness. They think they can push, manipulate, invade without consequence. But the truth is, violence isn't my first language anymore, but it's still fluent. I just don't speak it unless I'm protecting something I love. And Karen? She was about to learn that I don't need threats, weapons, or warnings. I need a reason. And she had just given me one. I've learned something about predators. The truly dangerous ones don't growl. They wait. They watch. They let their prey feel safe before they strike. That's how we were trained. That's how I operated. And that's exactly the mode I switched into the moment Karen stepped over the line. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I didn't storm across the street and demand an apology. That would have given her exactly what she wanted, evidence of instability, fuel for her narrative. Instead, I went quiet, cold, focused. I started with a house. 3 high-definition security cameras, one above the porch, one by the driveway, one facing the backyard. Motion activated. night vision capable, cloud backups, no wires to cut. Next, I installed a baby monitor with dual-channel audio recording. Not just for Ella, but because Karen had a habit of checking in too closely. I made sure every angle of our front door was covered. Madison didn't question me. She saw the change in my posture, the way I moved around the house like I was clearing a perimeter. She didn't ask and I didn't explain, but I saw the flicker of relief in her eyes. She knew I was back in control. Then came the digging. I pulled county HOA records. Tedious stuff, boring on purpose, but patterns always leave fingerprints, even in ink. Karen had served as president, vice president, or compliance officer for 4 different HOAs in the last 12 years. Each time, she resigned after disputes. Each resignation was followed by a quiet trail of complaints, civil suits, and, in one case, a restraining order filed by a family 2 blocks from here. I contacted them. It took some work, a few polite emails, and a promise not to involve them publicly, but one former neighbor eventually called me. She started with fake citations, he said. Then she told Child Services we were hitting our daughter. My wife nearly had a breakdown. Karen called it community concern. We had to move. My blood boiled, but I stayed calm. I asked for any records they had. He sent me scanned copies of old letters. The wording was nearly identical to the ones we'd received. Karen didn't just want control, she wanted compliance. And she preyed on new parents, exhausted couples, vulnerable families who couldn't fight back. She called it safety. But what she really wanted was submission. Well, not this time. I started logging everything. Every notice she sent. Every conversation we had. Every time she stood on the sidewalk just a little too long, watching the house. I even recorded her watering her roses because half the time she was speaking softly into her phone. Reporting? Gossiping? Who knows? I also filed a quiet, formal complaint to the HOA board, anonymously citing conflict of interest, targeted harassment, and prior abuse of authority. I included copies of her resignation history and the details of the restraining order. I knew it wouldn't remove her. Not yet, but it planted the seed. And when the next storm hit, the board would already have doubt in her name. Madison was regaining her footing too. She'd started journaling everything, time of calls, Ella's sleep patterns, her own emotional state. She said it helped her feel sane. I told her it was more than that. It was evidence. The more paper we had, the less ammo Karen could twist. Every move we made was deliberate. No rash steps, no emotional outbursts. Just slow, steady pressure. Because Karen didn't know what kind of man she was dealing with. I'd waited in freezing mud for days just to watch one compound window light up. I'd held my breath while crawling through wire to avoid alerting dogs trained to kill. Waiting, watching, and documenting wasn't just easy, it was natural. She thought she was tightening the leash, but in reality, I was the one setting the trap. And the next time she stepped out of line, I'd be ready. It was just after 2 a.m. when the chime went off. Soft, subtle, barely more than a whisper through the baby monitor. But I wasn't sleeping, not really. I hadn't truly slept in weeks. My body was still on SEAL time, running recon in the back of my own mind. I glanced at the monitor. Motion detected. Front yard. Camera 2. I slipped out of bed without a sound, moved like muscle memory. No light, no noise. Just precision. Madison stirred faintly, but I was already gone, down the stairs barefoot, heartbeat steady. I pulled up the live feed from the front porch. There she was, Karen, wearing black leggings, a dark windbreaker, and rubber-soled shoes. Not dressed for a jog, dressed for silence. Her phone was off. No flashlight. Just her and her clipboard. Yes, she even brought that. She crept up our walkway, stopped beneath the porch light, reached into her pocket. She tried the doorknob. Locked. She looked up, scanned the porch like she expected a camera, and somehow missed all 3. I had them nested into the trim, invisible from a standing angle with infrared coverage. Every second was being backed up to an encrypted cloud. Then she leaned in, pressed her ear to the door, and whispered, I couldn't make out all of it, but the mic picked up fragments. "You're not safe here. She deserves better. If you really love her, you let her go." My blood went ice cold. She wasn't just snooping. She was unraveling. I called 911. Calm. Measured. Gave them the address, the description, told them the intruder was known, nonviolent so far, but dangerously unstable. Then I waited. Karen didn't try to break in. She just stood there, whispering, humming, rocking slightly on her heels like she was rocking Ella. When the squad car rolled in 10 minutes later, she didn't run. She smiled, like it was a game, like she'd won. The officer stepped out and asked her what she was doing on my property. "I'm conducting a wellness check," she said brightly. I heard something. Thought the baby might be in distress. In the middle of the night, one of the officers asked. Karen nodded confidently. "You can never be too careful. I'm on the HOA compliance team. It's my duty to respond to community concerns." That's when I stepped out. Quiet, barefoot, calm as stone. The officers turned to me. "Sir, you made the call?" I nodded. "Yes." She attempted to open our front door. "She's been harassing my family for weeks." Karen gasped, almost laughing. "That's ridiculous. I was just checking. I have it all on video," I said, raising my phone. 3 different camera angles, time-stamped, audio included. The smile vanished. Karen's eyes darted between the officers and me. "He's exaggerating. He's paranoid. He threatened me once." Actually, the younger officer frowned. "Do you have proof of that, ma'am?" Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply looked her in the eyes and said, "I have what I need now." That line hit her harder than anything I could have shouted. The officers escorted her off our property. No cuffs, not yet, but a formal warning was issued and a case file was opened. They asked if I wanted to press charges for attempted unlawful entry. I told them not yet. I wanted her to stew in it first. Back inside, Madison met me at the door. She'd heard the commotion, held Ella tight against her chest. "She was really here?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. "She's done pretending now." "But why? What does she want?" I looked at our daughter. "She wants control," I said, "and when she can't have it, she'll burn everything around her." That night, I uploaded the footage to a secure drive, labeled everything, cross-referenced it with the past citations. The HOA, the CPS visit, her prior history. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was a pattern, a documented pattern. And Karen had just handed me the last piece I needed to take her down, legally, thoroughly, and permanently, because now I had evidence and a plan. It was the 3rd Thursday of the month, HOA meeting night. Usually, these gatherings were uneventful. Budget updates, landscaping debates, a heated discussion about the correct shade of beige for garage doors. But tonight was different. I had arrived early, dressed plainly, sat near the back with a neutral expression. Madison stayed home with Ella, not because she didn't want to be there, but because we agreed. Tonight was about precision, not emotion. Karen entered 10 minutes late, as usual, flanked by her clipboard and her signature self-importance. She smiled and waved like a small-town politician, taking her seat at the center of the board table. The room was packed, more than usual. Word had spread. Not about the videos, not yet, but about the incident, about Karen being escorted from our property by police. She began the meeting with her usual routine. "Welcome, neighbors," she chirped. "Before we begin with regular business, I'd like to address some unfortunate rumors regarding recent events involving myself and a certain family on Hemlock Drive." That was our street. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes swept the room like a warning. "There's been a misunderstanding," she continued. "As many of you know, I've dedicated years to this community. I've always put safety and standards first. But unfortunately, not everyone appreciates accountability. In fact, some, excuse me." I stood, calm, even. Karen's jaw stiffened. "Mr. Beck, this is a board meeting, and as a homeowner, I'm allowed to speak during open comment," I said. The room shifted. Heads turned. A few neighbors nodded in agreement. Karen sat back, visibly annoyed. "I have a concern," I said, pulling a small remote from my pocket. about abuse of power and selective harassment. The projector screen at the front of the room flickered on. I had brought a laptop, already connected, already queued. Over the past month, my wife and I have received multiple citations, visits from child services, and most recently, an uninvited 2 a.m. visit from Ms. Langley here, I said, motioning to Karen. She claimed to be performing a wellness check. At night, without permission. Gasps rippled through the room. I clicked play. The footage began, black and white, time-stamped, crystal clear. Karen creeping up the walkway. Karen trying the door. Karen whispering to herself. Several neighbors turned to look at her. She looks like she's casing the place, someone muttered. I advanced the video, skipping to the audio segment. If you really love her, you'll let her go. The room went silent. Karen stood abruptly. That video is edited. It's misleading. This is all, it's not the only one, I said, cutting her off. I also have copies of prior HOA complaints she's filed against other families in former neighborhoods, some involving CPS, one ending in a restraining order. I passed copies of those records to the HOA president. He scanned them, frowning. This isn't the first time, Karen, he asked. It's all taken out of context, she snapped, her voice now cracking. These people are dangerous. They're manipulating you. No, I said. You're just not used to people fighting back. Karen's eyes darted around the room. The smiles were gone. The nods replaced with folded arms and skeptical glances. Her kingdom, this quiet little court of manicured lawns and rulebooks, was crumbling. The HOA president cleared his throat. Karen, I think it's best you step down from your compliance role effective immediately. We'll be reviewing these materials with legal counsel. Karen didn't speak. She just stared at me. For the first time, she looked small. I nodded politely and sat back down. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was done. As the meeting adjourned, several neighbors approached me quietly, some with thanks, others with their own stories. Turns out Karen's grip had been tighter than we knew. We weren't the only ones she'd targeted. We were just the ones who finally had proof. And that night, as I walked home under the same porch lights she once used to watch us, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. And a deep, unshakable understanding. Predators don't expect their prey to bite back. There's a saying we used in the teams. The most dangerous enemy isn't the one with power. It's the one who's lost it. After the HOA meeting, Karen disappeared for a few days. No morning walks. No passive-aggressive smiles. Not even her usual friendly reminders folded into doorframes. Her blinds stayed closed. Her rose bushes wilted from neglect. At first, I thought maybe she'd finally accepted defeat. Maybe she'd realized she couldn't bully her way through a brick wall. I was wrong, because when predators lose control, they don't retreat. They get reckless. It happened on a Sunday. Madison had taken Ella out for a short walk around the block. The sun was warm, the street calm, and for the first time in weeks, she looked like herself again. Lighter, brighter. I stayed back to finish some repairs in the nursery, tightening the crib screws, checking the monitor batteries, touching up paint on the wall Ella had started kicking with her little feet. The house was peaceful, until the doorbell rang. It wasn't a knock. It was urgent, rushed, someone pounding the bell like the world was ending. I opened the door to find a frantic woman I didn't recognize, probably a neighbor from a few streets over. She was breathless. "Your wife, I think something's wrong." She fainted or passed out. A woman flagged me down and said she needed help, told me to come get you. Said she's near the big oak by the playground. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my phone, slipped my pistol holster into my waistband, concealed just in case, and ran out the door. The playground was just down the road, a grassy clearing near the trail. I got there in 2 minutes flat, scanning the area as I moved. No Madison. No stroller. No baby. What I did see, sitting at the edge of the trail, half concealed by trees, was Karen's car. Parked crooked. Engine running. That was all I needed. I drew in a breath, switched from husband to operator in a single heartbeat. I moved fast but silent, keeping low. I approached from the rear passenger side. When I reached the door, I heard it faint crying. Ella, and a voice. Karen. Attempted abduction. Trespassing. False emergency report. Harassment. Karen was silent in the back seat of the cruiser, just staring at me through the glass. And I stared right back, unblinking. The crowd that had gathered watched everything. Some whispered. Some filmed. No one defended her. As the officers pulled away, one of them turned to me. You okay, sir? I nodded. She thought we were weak. The officer raised an eyebrow. You don't seem weak to me. I'm not, I said. I'm trained not to lose control. And she never knew the difference. Later that night, Madison asked me something. How did you stay so calm? I would have lost it. I looked at Ella sleeping in her crib. Safe, warm, innocent. And I said, because she thought this was a game of fear. But I don't play games. I end them. The silence felt strange at first. After weeks of tension surveillance and whispered threats, the quiet that followed Karen's arrest was almost too soft. It made me pause, made me check the porch cameras twice, scan the street longer than necessary, sleep a little lighter those first few nights. But as the days passed, the silence settled into something else. Relief. Karen was officially charged with attempted child abduction, trespassing, and filing a false emergency report. The police had the video, the 911 transcripts, and my documentation. Madison and I provided written statements. So, did two neighbors who had seen Karen near the park that day. One of them admitted she'd always felt off about Karen but never knew what to say. The case moved quickly, faster than I expected. Probably because of the severity, probably because, deep down, everyone knew this wasn't her first time. It was just the first time someone fought back. Her bail was denied. The HOA board wasted no time. Within a week, they held an emergency session. Karen was officially removed from her position. Her privileges revoked. Her access to HOA tools, documents, even the community newsletter, all stripped away. She had ruled that neighborhood like a petty tyrant for years. And just like that, it was over. The board issued a formal apology to us in writing. It was the first time anyone in the neighborhood had ever seen the board publicly admit wrongdoing. They cited a failure to act on early warning signs and promised to review the community's complaint escalation policies. I didn't care about the apology. I cared about the peace. The quiet mornings returned. Madison could take Ella out without checking over her shoulder. I could fix the garage without wondering if someone was watching from behind half-closed blinds. Neighbors we barely knew began to stop by. They brought casseroles, small gifts for the baby, even just kind words. We're so sorry you had to go through that. One man said, we should have spoken up sooner. Some of them had been afraid. Others didn't want to get involved. I didn't blame them. I've seen what fear does to people. It makes them freeze. It makes them small. That's why people like Karen thrive, not because they're strong, but because the rest of the world goes silent. But not us. Not this time. Madison smiled again. Not the forced smile she used to wear when Karen approached, but the kind that reached her eyes. Ella began sleeping better, sensing the shift even as a baby. The house felt like a home again. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky turned orange above the rooftops, Madison and I sat on the porch, just rocking slowly. Ella slept in her bassinet beside us. The breeze was warm. Birds chirped in the distance. Do you think she'll come back? Madison asked quietly. No, I said, not because I believed in the system, but because I believed in her fear of me. She knows now, knows what I'm capable of. She's not coming back. Madison reached over, laced her fingers through mine. I thought I was going to break, she said. I really did. You didn't, I said. You're stronger than she'll ever be. She gave a soft laugh. You didn't even raise your voice. I didn't need to. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's steady, patient, relentless. And sometimes justice looks like a father holding his daughter under a calm sky, knowing she'll grow up in a house where fear doesn't live anymore. That night, I stood by Ella's crib and watched her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling, the soft twitch of her fingers, the peace in her little face. And I realized something. Karen didn't lose because she was evil. She lost because she underestimated the power of someone who's trained to protect and finally has something worth protecting. 3 months passed. The house was quiet again, but not the kind of silence that feels dangerous. It was peaceful, lived in, the kind of quiet you earn. Madison had started painting again. Something about it helped her breathe. Her colors were brighter now. Ella was growing fast, smiling more, babbling in bursts that melted every inch of my armor. I still checked the porch cameras every morning. Habit, not fear. Karen pled guilty to a reduced charge as part of a deal: court-mandated therapy, probation, permanent ban from all HOA leadership roles. The prosecutor told me she'd likely relocate, change her name. Fine by me. She wasn't my problem anymore. The HOA board had restructured. New faces, better policies, monthly check-ins with community members. Madison had even been asked to sit on the family wellness committee. Funny how things turn around. I thought that chapter was closed. Truly. Until one morning, about 6 weeks later, I was out front, clipping the hedges while Madison packed the car for a short weekend trip. Ella was napping inside. That's when the moving truck pulled up across the street. Not unusual. The Joneses had finally sold their house. Good people, they were moving closer to grandkids. I waved as the movers stepped out, and then I saw her. Not Karen. Someone younger. Thinner. Hair pulled back tight, clipboard in hand. She stood just outside the cab of a black SUV, watching the movers with that same stiff, scrutinizing posture. She glanced over at me. Our eyes locked for just a second, and then the smile. Tight, wide, practiced. I felt something shift in my gut. Later that evening, as I stood on the porch with Ella asleep on my shoulder, I watched as she walked the edge of her new yard, measuring angles, pointing at flagstones, taking notes. I heard her introduce herself to a neighbor. "Hi, I'm Melinda. My sister used to live in a place just like this. I've always loved communities with structure." She laughed softly, too softly. I watched the neighbor nod politely, unaware of the warning in that sentence. I didn't move. I didn't speak. But I felt it. That slow, coiled instinct deep inside me. The one that never really goes away. Because some people think they're clever enough to finish what others started. And some people forget. Some of us are always watching. Fade to black.